Hi, my name is Linda McKay, and I'm with Big Data Trunk, a corporate training company. We deal with learning and development professionals, and one of the things that we've noticed is you face very similar challenges in your work. You have to deal with pivoting when COVID hit, the impact of AI is coming. How do you measure success? Creating culturally sensitive content. It's something you all have to do, and we thought it would be helpful to create a forum where you could share information with each other. And to that end, we are interviewing professionals in your field. The interview we have today is with Grace Durnford. Grace is with medical MSH, Management Sciences for Health, based in Massachusetts. So without further ado, let's. So Grace, hi, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you.
so can you tell me a little bit about who you're working for and a little bit about yourself? I'm going to ask you some questions about how you got into L&D, but let's start with where you are right now and your position and what you're doing.
Sure, yeah. So right now I'm working as the Learning and Development Manager at a company called Management Sciences for Health, typically goes by MSH. And we are a global nonprofit advisory organization that works with a variety of local partners, sometimes governments, sometimes health groups, private sector, to do a wide range of different projects, but that are all aimed at strengthening the local health system. So it's sort of all about improving the health in the countries that we work.
And where are you located? It's an international company, I assume.
It is international. We have offices in Massachusetts and DC, but then are in 48 countries around the world right now, or somewhere around
Right.
there.
And you, sorry, and you have the responsibility for managing learning and development in all of those countries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Interesting challenge. So the other thing, when you and I spoke before, I found that you had an interesting path into L&D. So you come from a fine arts background, I think. So tell me a little bit about how that worked. Like what brought you over into the L&D sphere? It seems quite different than what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up at MSH really kind of quite by accident, and just got sort of pulled in by the mission, and the work that we're doing. It's really inspiring when you hear some of the stories and some of the results and the things that we've been able to do in the countries in which we work. And I found kind of a niche for myself in the company doing mostly operational training. There was a huge need to just help people understand how to get an invoice submitted, how to procure something. We get a lot of government funding, so there are a lot of rules. So, helping putting together little cheat sheets and flow charts and checklists and things like that. And that just kind of sort of became more and more of my job. Through a number of systems implementations, I was brought in to do the instructions and the user training for a couple different new systems that we've implemented over the years. Just sort of was really sort of doing learning for a while, and then eventually got scooped up and brought into HR.
Okay, so the transition really has moved out of more technical process training into a wider sphere. So your training covers much more now than the technical. Okay, and I assume that would be, personal training, management training, that kind of thing. Is that what you offer?
Yeah, a lot of leadership and management is a big focus right now.
Right. And so how big is your group that you work with in L&D in your company?
So the talent development team is three. Three.
So that's quite
it
a
was
challenge.
one for a number of years, so even three is an expansion. But we support 1,800 staff, 1,600 of whom are outside the U.S., and 88% of whom are from the country or region in which they work.
That's interesting.
It's not sort of U.S. staff that have relocated to Nigeria, for example. It's Nigerians working in Nigeria.
So that's interesting. There must be many challenges related to that sort of training rollout. So you have three people. Obviously, you don't speak all those languages. And so tell me a little bit about what it's like. What are the challenges and maybe how you've overcome some of those. Like when you're rolling training out, management training to 18 or 48 countries, what are the kinds of things you have to check off on your checklist? What do you have to do?
Well, there are a number of sort of different areas you have to think about. You need to take into account the cultures in which we work, particularly like just thinking of leadership and management training. There are very different sort of cultural norms around what it means to be a manager, what it means to be someone's boss in some of the places that we work, and you need to find out what those are and try to take that into account. When you're designing your materials, you want everyone to feel like you're speaking to them, and so that means you need to understand where they're at. And then just on the technical side, there are a lot of challenges. Language, that's a challenge. You need to be able to manage translation and having multiple language versions of everything. And then connectivity also in the places we work is a really big challenge. Internet connectivity, in some cases electrical, just being connected to electricity is not necessarily a given in some of the places we work. So while we do, I think, make pretty good use of the technology that we have at our disposal, we also at the same time can never trust that will necessarily be available to everyone. You always need to have kind of an offline, a PDF, PowerPoint, something that can be printed.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious about the cultural challenges, well, language as well, but you've had 3 people. How do you feel, how do you have confidence that that you're rolling out something that is culturally sensitive? What are the kinds of things you do? Who do you engage with to help you with that? Because you clearly can't do it with just 3. How do you manage that?
Well, so we try and work with the staff that have that knowledge, the staff that are based in that country, the staff that support the staff based in that country. We have a number of people who've been in the international development field for many, many years, have a lot of experience living in many of these different countries. The short answer is you have to go out and ask and ask and ask and ask again. Something that I've found and that I'm still somewhat surprised by is how little people will volunteer to you. You really do have to go out and ask. You could design a training that's just completely tone deaf, and you won't know unless you're really, pressing for that feedback.
That's an interesting experience. I wonder why you think that people aren't more forthcoming. Do you think that they don't have an expectation that it can be more culturally sensitive?
I think so. I think it's a combination of factors. I think there's that. I think in some places and at times we are working against, sort of the general sense that we're corporate and that we don't care about the little guy or the people on the ground. Sometimes people are just busy too. Also, if you think just any time that you've watched a tutorial video or something and found like, oh, this isn't great, it takes extra moments for you to then put in writing why it wasn't great.
No, it's a really good.
So chances are you just sort of think it to yourself, maybe you say it to the person next to you, and that's as far as it goes.
It occurs to me that everyone in L&D is challenged by this, because even if you're rolling something out across the United States, there's cultural differences. Yours is just exacerbated by it's bigger. You have a bigger set of problems, but probably not completely different than what other people would face.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and the sort of the way that everything we were just talking about, sort of going out and really pushing for feedback. that's sort of a basic adult learning principle of trying to involve the learner and give them a sense of ownership and responsibility and agency. So I don't think it's necessarily different, but I think the fact that we know we work in all these countries really make sure that we don't forget.
And maybe in some ways that's an advantage because you have an expectation that you need to deal with these differences and potentially in US people don't. So I'm really curious, has there been something that really surprised you, really, that you would never expect that it would be culturally insensitive or something that worked or didn't work that really took you by surprise?
I mean, I can remember this is sort of less about training design, but just sort of about the sort of the technicalities of the things that we roll out. There was a time when we really needed people to sort of one of these certification course things, and we were trying to get people to enter basic demographic information, full name, address, birth date. Now, all of those fields are challenging. Just even just something like you think like, oh, first and last name, right? Yeah. Not every country has first and last names. So that was a challenge. Address also, for a lot of the people we're working with, that don't really have that kind of structured system of addresses that you might be used to in the US. But then the thing that really surprised me is that people were refusing to give their birthday. They wouldn't do it. Because in some of the countries in which we work, I think the particular issue is in Uganda, there's just such a strong age discrimination is such a major issue that people will really go to great lengths not to divulge their age, and kind of came back to us and said, you're not going to get one to give you your birthday. You got to take that off.
So you just took it off?
In that case, we were able to remove that.
Yeah. How interesting and unexpected, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I dealt with foreign addresses, and it was basically turn left at the White House. How do you structure that? See, it's quite interesting. So when you roll out your training, what is the cadence? Is it something, do you do new things every year? Or is it beefing up stuff that's already there? What's the cadence of training rollout that you do?
I wouldn't necessarily say that there is necessarily much of a cadence, in the sense that what we're rolling out in any given year depends on both the need and the resources that are available. So there have absolutely been years where updating the annual ethics training is all that's for that year. That's what we're able to do. Other years, like this past year, we have been able to roll out leadership and management training. We are hoping to have a phase 2 in the coming year. We'll see.
And did your training change? I know that we're past COVID, and you've dealt with whatever technical challenges, but did your training rollout have to change dramatically, because you were already doing, in some ways, very asynchronous sort of training? You weren't doing in-person training in all these countries. So has it affected how you're doing training now? Did the COVID pandemic affect what you're doing now? Change it in some way?
I would say it changed it really most within the US. We used to have these 2 US offices in Boston and DC with a large staff presence who were physically in those offices. So oftentimes training, for that audience will be done in person. We no longer have that. And so now, someone who works out of the DC office might as well work out of the South Africa office, because they're going to be connecting remotely as well.
And that's a permanent change. Yeah. Okay. Now, did that change your staffing? Because if you were doing in-person training, was your staff responsible for the in-person training as well? Oh, so now you're freed up to do other things.
Yes, I suppose. Yeah. Although, it's like making room in your purse. It doesn't stay empty for long.
And also, did it? You're still doing potentially one-on-one training, but it's just over Zoom or over some sort of media, but you're still taking the time. You still have to take the time to do the training. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, whether you're facilitating a session to people who are in the room or to people who are on the screen, that's still.
One of the things that you mentioned when we spoke before was that how you saw L&D as being a helping profession. It was an interesting perspective of what it is. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what does that mean to you when you talk about L&D and being a helping profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at its core, that's what we're doing in L&D, is we're helping people to figure out how to do something. We're helping people to learn how to do something better. We're helping people to develop a skill that they want to develop. We're connecting the knowledge with the people that need the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And are those the rewards for you in this job?
I'm sorry?
Are those the rewards for you? Like when you see that happening,
Yeah.
is that the
Yeah.
reward for you? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. When you hear from someone that, oh, this finally makes sense, or, that something's working so much better or faster now, or, something that you provided really helped them connect the dots in a way they never had before. That's very fulfilling.
And also what you're doing enables people to advance in some way in their own careers, their own professions, their own
Hopefully.
development, right? Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
That would be the goal. That would be the goal. The other thing we talked about was, the future of L&D, and maybe what what happened in the pandemic, that it raised the bar in some way. Talk a little bit about that. What does that mean when you see the benefit of it? What to your profession?
Yeah. I mean, I hope anyway that the fact that there are now that so much more learning is online and so many more people are consumers of online learning, that will over time sort of have the effect of raising the bar, in the sense that an audience of people who are used to online learning will probably have higher expectations of what that online learning is going to be. Someone who maybe even experienced a lot of online learning as part of high school and college and stuff, they're going to expect that any online learning that they take is going to have participatory elements. They're going to expect to see the chat exchange. They're going to expect to see videos from their instructor. They're going to expect, or at least I hope, that's what I hope, is that people will have seen sort of what e-learning can be at its best, and will start really expecting that and demanding that of their instructors.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I realize I've experienced that in my own. I was looking for a class and I rejected some. They were just old fashioned, and I think they were old fashioned because they just repeated the in-person experience with an online experience. There was nothing more. And so it was, but I think what you're talking about is really a full, complex, there's all kinds of ways that you can deliver information to people, engage with people. And now we have an opportunity to do that. That's an interesting. And do you feel that the training that you're rolling out, it starts to encompass some of those more inclusive aspects, so you can engage people in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of hope so. We really try to take a blended approach where there is some content delivery online, but also some sort of element of group discussion. Some in the leadership and management program, for example, if that's what we're doing, we're using sort of a standard online course format for a lot of the content delivery, but then really I think most of the learning and the development is happening in small discussion groups where people are getting together and sort of talking about the content that they read that week, and doing specific sort of guided activities, having a discussion that's been sort of structured for them, to help apply the learning, to help sort of encourage people to share their experiences with each other and kind of create that community. I mean, hopefully that's honestly one of the most difficult things.
Yeah, it would be, because at that point you're a little bit hands off. You're not there. You don't know how that's rolling out or how that's happening. But do you put something in place as part of your training to try to, either is it train the trainer, like helping people be the facilitator for those discussions, and how do you encourage, or how do you try to make sure that those things are happening after the training is done?
Yeah, so we put together a sort of a complete facilitator's guide that takes you through the whole session. It even has you don't have to use the script, but it even has chunks of script in there for anyone who maybe isn't sure what to say at different points. So we provide people with that, and then yes, we do a sort of train the trainer kind of facilitator support session, where the people who are going to be facilitating that particular discussion can all get together. Sort of we go through the session from start to finish. They can ask questions.
So when you roll out the training, do you always have a facilitator on and present for the training, or is it like the leadership training? Is it certain kinds of training where you need that level, that extra level of participation?
You mean in terms of having the actual learners themselves leading the conversation?
Well, I guess what it sounds like you're saying is that, let's say you roll out your leadership training, and you've included discussions, you've included the kind of thing you're talking about where people are engaging with each other, and you've got the facilitator's handbook. That's implying there's a person on the ground who's going to be facilitating that, or is it still remote?
So it is still remote,
Okay,
because
okay,
the groups are made up of staff from all different countries.
okay.
Um, there are some of our countries where we have enough for presence, enough people that we could potentially do, groups in person. But that's really the exception to the rule. In many of the places that we work, we might not have enough.
Okay, so
Not have
that's
many
interesting. So
staff.
So what you're saying is you're still using online capability, but it's not, you've stopped the instructor led and now you're doing facilitated discussions with the people in the training. That's interesting. It's an interesting way of using online education. It's yeah. All right. So Grace, one of the things that would be interesting is to know your path, especially for people that are interested in L&D but don't have the experience yet. Now, you come from a fine arts background, quite different from L&D. How did you prepare yourself? Because clearly you're rolling out some very sophisticated training. How did you prepare yourself for this role, given where you came from?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I did, and one of the things that I think really kind of got me on the path, to instructional design, was picking up the ethics training that we have to do an ethics training every year. We've been doing this one for years. That was just, if you imagine in your mind the worst online course you've ever taken, that is what this was. Honestly, I just decided I'm not gonna do this anymore. And so I got online, and sort of educated myself about what was available. I picked up Storyline. This was before Rise had come out, but picked up Storyline, watched a lot of tutorial videos. If it's something that you're interested in, there's a lot of information out there. I think there are a lot of blogs. There are a lot of different people in the space who are sharing their knowledge openly online. And then I also did some continuing education courses in instructional design, just to try and sort of build up the vocabulary, to kind of get more familiar with some of the industry terms, and Gagne and andragogy and those sorts of things, to sort of back up the practical experience that I was already getting. The benefit, I think one of the benefits of working at a place that runs lean, doesn't have a lot of resources, is that often means that you're able to do things that maybe in another organization you wouldn't be able to do. I think there's a little bit more freedom. No one else is doing it. Oh, you want to pick that? Great, yeah.
Right, but it sounds like, but to back that up, you prepared yourself for that, so you couldn't have done it without learning the language of L&D, without, okay. And I think you're right. There's a lot of information out there now that if people want to educate themselves, it seems to be a fairly hot topic. I don't know, maybe it's because of the pandemic where everything transitioned. I don't know, but maybe it's because I'm doing these interviews, but I hear so much more about it. Yeah. Yeah. All right, for your time. It's really, really great of you to give us this time for the interview. But tell me, is there something I should have asked, something that you would like to, something I should have asked you in this interview that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the message, or the sort of philosophy about L&D and instructional design in general that I want to spread is really that we're here to enable learning, that we're here to create the environment that enables students to do their own learning, not actually to teach them anything. So I would just really encourage anyone working in this space to think of it that way, and to think of it think more about, how can I enable this person to put this knowledge into practice, rather than, you can get distracted with, the newest technology, or how can I make this look prettier, or how can I improve the user experience of this button set or something. I think to kind of step back and just think about, I think about like a sandbox, or, just to create the space to kind of let people learn and make mistakes and exchange with each other, because that's, I believe, really what's going to be the most effective, regardless of the topic or the audience.
It's a very interesting perspective. It's kind of a perspective shift in a way. So it's a little more humble, which is, I think, what you see is yourself as, if you're providing the right support, you're enabling people to do what they can do. It gives the person in the training a lot more. I hate to use the word agency because that's so overused, but it's theirs to pick up if they want, and you're just trying to make it as easy as possible and create every opportunity you can. It's a nice perspective, I think, for looking at how you're working in L&D. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to thank you very much again for your time, and yes, I look forward to talking to you again sometime. Thanks, Grace.
Yeah, thank you.